visit voiceamericabusiness.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Like a chrysalis, we're emerging from the economy of the Industrial Revolution, an economy confined to and limited by the Earth's physical resources, into the economy in mind, in which there are no bounds on human imagination, and the freedom to create is the most precious natural resource.
Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise, Business and the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by SAGE, supporting small and medium-sized businesses by creating greater freedom for them to succeed. I'm Ron Baker, along with my good friend, VeraSage Institute colleague and co-host, Ed Kless. And on today's show, folks, we're going to do Best Business Books of 2015. So welcome, Ed.
Hey, good to talk to you, Ron.
Yeah, you too. Interesting show last week from the VeraSage Symposium. That was great.
Yes, that was a lot of fun to put that together, to re-listen to some of the things that we talked about and hear from our international folks. So it's always good to get a different perspective on things, and I think that room was just bulging with ideas and great things. So we're happy to share that with you, and I hope the rest of you liked it as much as we did. So
absolutely. So, Ed, on this show, we decided to do best business books. I kind of call this Baker's Dozen, thanks to my name. So I do a presentation of the top 13 business books like I've read in a year or of even all time. But we're going to focus today on probably the best book that we read in this year, best business book that we've read. And in the last segment, we'll do some honorary mentions. So I'll let you start. What do you think so far? I know the year's not over yet, but what's been the best business book you've read this year?
I guess it's possible that something could come in the next 2 weeks. But I have to say, and this is one that you recommended to me. Of course, probably 90% of the books that I read are ones that you recommend to me. So, and truth be told, I get asked a lot by people, hey, you read an awful lot. And I probably read maybe 24 books a year, plus a lot of internet reading and stuff like that, but 24 business books a year. But my friend, Mr. Baker over here, you're like somewhere between 50 and 100, depending upon the year, aren't you?
Yeah. I've been running over 100 the last couple of years, but yeah.
He's a machine, folks. He's a machine. Okay. My book that I picked is the one by Jeff Colvin. Humans are underrated. Humans are underrated. What high achievers know that brilliant machines will never know. And this was just a fascinating read.
Yeah, wasn't it?
Yes, well crafted, well constructed as a book. Just a pleasure to run through. I found it to be a page turner because there was some lots and lots of interesting stories. But the basic premise of the book, for those of you who didn't read it, because I know Ron did, is that look. In the next 20 or 30 years, most of what we humans do is going to be replaced by machines. The whole idea that Watson, the IBM computer, can win at Jeopardy and play chess is just unbelievable in terms of what will happen 20 or 30 years from now. I mean, if you think about it, 20 or 30 years from now, what occupies your pocket with your iPhone would have been a room full of equipment, right?
Right. Sure.
And I think I've seen stats on this. It's like, if in 1985 you bought everything that your iPhone is capable of doing, and that doesn't necessarily include certain apps, but just what it's capable of doing out of the box, it would be like $150,000 or $200,000 today's dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you then imagine that fast forward 30 years from now, and this is the whole, Back to the Future 30 years from now, well, whatever you hold in your pocket is probably going to be what Watson is today. And that's pretty amazing, right? And it's just mind-boggling.
It is. I mean, he brought up the fact that when Watson won on Jeopardy, he was not connected to the internet. He had just had a bunch of stuff downloaded into him, like Wikipedia, Encyclopedia Britannica. I mean, but he was not live on the web.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I love the line. This is one of my favorite lines in the book. Is Watson is the only computer that's worth more used than new.
So true. And one of his points, isn't it, Ed, is that Moore's law is going to continue. I mean, the fact that he gave the Sony first transistor radio had 5 chips in it, and Intel's latest chip has 5 billion or transistors. Mm-hmm. 5 versus 5 billion. And that's only going to get more and more. And so the raw computing power is just going to do nothing but increase. So Watson's capabilities are only going to grow.
Right. And don't forget, Moore's law is exponential.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So at least it's not logarithmic, but it's exponential. So just that idea is it's again continuously mind-boggling. But because they've got Moore's law down to now. I guess the predicted end of Moore's law, because you'd have to get to the subatomic particle level. I believe now is 2060.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's when the gravy train ends, assuming, and this is of course a huge assumption, assuming that you can only go to that you'd have to go to the subatomic particle to make it happen.
Right. One of the things he talks about in the book that I also found fascinating is we always like to say, oh yeah, okay, this computer thing, blah blah blah, but they can't, they're not good with emotions. And he says, well,
yeah, that's not true.
AI beg to differ. A computer, a robot is going to be able to read your emotions because they can pick up on the facial combinations and facial expressions, and that's one of the ways our emotions are highlighted, and sophisticated computers can pick up on that.
No, they not only can they pick up on it, they can pick up on it better than we can.
Better,
right?
Yeah.
Because they can instantaneously recognize stuff that our eyes can't pick up.
The other thing I thought was fascinating about the way Jeff Colvin, attacked this thesis was that he said figuring out what computers will never do is an exceedingly perilous route, right? 20 years ago, we would have poo-pooed maybe a driverless car, right? But that's just the point. There are going to be driverless cars, and like he says, those are only going to get better as you and I become worse. So he thinks the better strategy, and I love this, Ed, he says the better strategy is to ask whether the activities that we humans will simply insist be performed by other humans, regardless of what computers can do.
And that is the brilliant question that emerges from the book, right? Is don't ask what computers won't be able to do. Ask what will we humans prefer that other humans do. And that is, I think, extraordinarily profound, right? Because
I do too.
Yes, these things will do it better. Computers will do it better, but we still won't want it. And of course, I think he uses the example as Watson is already better at diagnosing cancer than a team of doctors. But we don't want to hear from Watson our diagnosis of lymphoma.
Right. Except, Ed, in the book I'm going to talk about in the third segment probably, I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to challenge that very notion, or at least the authors of this book, they challenge that. But we'll put that aside. We'll come back to it.
Yep. Now, so now let me talk about the main problem that I have with the book.
Okay, good.
And I think you know what it is. It's that 6 letters, 7-letter word. They use empathy.
Yeah,
he uses the word empathy, and it makes me crazy because it's not empathy; it's compassion, is what he's talking about. And he tries to defend it, and at one point even he says, and I highlighted this in the book. He says, that age-old human trait, empathy. I'm like, okay, well, you haven't studied the word. Because empathy that word only emerged in the 1920s. right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not quite sure. I mean, I guess they're trying to say that it's a characteristic that we humans have always had, but I so much prefer the term compassion over empathy, and I had to get past that. Because
right.
every
you
time
had to substitute it.
Yeah, I had to substitute it because every time I read it, it makes me crazy. And I know it's a personal thing, and I know that there's going to be people who are listening to me and say, "Oh, Ed, just get over yourself." But,
well, I think one of the reasons, Ed, not to defend Colvin, but I think I have a theory for why he used the word in the context he did, was he talked about anthropologists, and he quoted one that has a list of universal features that anthropologists exist in every society throughout history. Right. And the first one on the list is empathy.
Yes. But again, and I think he even says it at a certain point. He says, but of course, we can't really fully be empathetic because we would be driven crazy. You'd be exhausted.
Yes. Absolutely.
Right.
Yes,
and of course,
absolutely.
and that ultimately is my point.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
That the whole because empathy is for good or for bad most closely associated with the Bill Clinton thing, right? I'll feel your pain.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And what we don't want is we don't want leaders that actually feel our pain, because then we just have leaders in pain too.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And we talked about this in the context of doctors and all
right.
of that. Although I have to tell you, there's some books I read this year that challenge that, and like the Cleveland Clinic and even some books on the Mayo Clinic, they talk about empathy, how they have to put empathy into their service standard. And I know it would absolutely drive you crazy.
Yeah, because again, it's compassion. And so here's what he describes at it. And I do like this. If you take this as the definition of what I call compassion rather than empathy, is he breaks it into two parts, right? Discerning the thoughts and feelings of others, right? And responding appropriately. And if we take that as the penultimate, those two things together as the penultimate human characteristic, then that's where the whole point of this book is driven off, that we humans are underrated because dang, we do not give ourselves enough credit. We are really good at that when we concentrate on it, or can be. We can be really good at it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really interesting that the things that will be left to humans, like relationship building and creativity, brainstorming, all of these different things that he talks about. I mean, there are certain things that we want humans to do, like parole decisions, or even a judge in a jury trial, or indeed jury. I wouldn't want a jury box full of Watsons, right? I'd want a jury.
Well, so I thought about that. So this is interesting that you bring that up, because I wasn't going to talk about this, but if I were innocent, if I were actually innocent and on trial, I think I'd want the computer.
Because of the facial expressions?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's a good point.
If I were guilty,
yeah.
I want the humans, because we can fake them out.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking things like drone attacks, right? Because there are just certain decisions you want a human to have to agonize over, right? No, irrespective of how good computers are.
Correct. Absolutely correct. And I think that's his absolutely fascinating point, is that there's just certain things that we are going to forever want humans to do with humans. And, there was nothing with that conclusion that I disagreed with. I said, yep, that makes complete sense to me.
Right. And just before we go into our break, just to reiterate, folks, the great question from this book is stop asking what a computer can't do and start asking whether the activities that we humans will simply insist be performed by other humans, regardless of how good computers can do it. And I think that's really the key insight from that book. At least that's what I got.
No, absolutely. And we've already discussed that we want to create workshops around that concept, because I think it's an important one.
Absolutely. So, folks, we need to take a break here, but I'd like to remind you can check out the full show notes on every show at The Soul of Enterprise. You can also email me and Ed at asktsoe@verasage.com. And please go to the iTunes and rate our show. That really helps us a lot. And now we want to hear from our sponsor, Leading Results.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
Is your website just a brochure, or is it your best salesperson? If your site is not the best lead generation tool you have, we should talk. We are Leading Results. We build websites and marketing programs that impact your bottom line. Using HubSpot or WordPress, we'll create a website and supporting marketing program that gets your business found, converts web visitors to leads, and provides clear tracking on what is and is not working. Learn about our team and approach to your success. Visit leadingresults.com/TSOE to find out more.
Have you ever read a book that changed your life? I sure have. But have you ever read a book where the foreword changed your life? Me neither. Hello, I'm Greg Kite. I wrote the foreword to Ron Baker and Ed Kless's new ebook, The Soul of Enterprise, Dialogues on Business and the Knowledge Economy. The value of this book is found entirely in its foreword. So when you buy it, think of it as buying the foreword and getting the rest of the book for free. Available now for download exclusively on Amazon.com.
We're always talking business. Talk to an expert. Call now toll free 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Voice America Business Network.
We are back with our Mannheim Steamroller on. That must mean it's December.
It is. It's that time of year again.
Love that music. That's some great stuff. Yep. So we're up to your favorite business book of the year, Ron. And again, so you of the 100 plus business books that you read this year, this is number one, huh?
This is number one. And Ed, I just finished it back in November. In fact, it was after the VeraSage symposium that I read this book while I was on the road doing a big speaking tour. And it's called The Future of the Professions by Richard Susskind and his son, Daniel Susskind. Now, Richard, I want to say he's a lawyer, but I'm not sure. But he's certainly a consultant to lawyers. He's a professor. The kid, Daniel, is an economics lecturer at Oxford. So I think he may be a PhD candidate or whatever. But the book absolutely, literally blew my mind. Now, Richard Susskind has written prior books, things like The End of Lawyers and all of that. So he's been kind of talking about this theme. But I think because his son being an economist, Dad, this book incredibly resonated with me. Because I think he brought an angle to it the way an economist would. And that's why it appealed to me far more than prior Richard Susskind works that I've read or looked at. So what they're basically saying is we are advancing into a post-professional society.
This is very popular, Ron.
I know, especially when you're somebody who works with the professions like we do, right? Yep. It sounds scary, but Ed, I think it's full of possibility. But they do make an incredible case that the professions, will be replaced, dismantled, if you will. They're not going to work the way they did prior to the 20th century. And I think it's a really compelling argument. They say we'll not only have driverless cars in the future, but we'll have teacherless students, doctorless patients, lawyerless clients, consultantless businesses, clergyless parishioners. and what's one of the things I really like it is, they're looking at all the professions, including clergy, including journalism, and on top of lawyers, doctors, and accountants and auditors. But this idea that we're entering a post-professional society is very, very provocative statement, I think. And then they set out to basically try and prove that thesis. And just a few interesting facts here. More people signed up for Harvard's online course in 1 year than have attended the actual university in its 377 years of existence.
Shake my head. I mean,
Three times as many disagreements every year amongst traders on eBay are resolved using online dispute resolution than there are lawsuits filed in the entire U.S. court system. In 2014, Ed, 48 million people used online tax prep software rather than a tax professional. I think you were one of them.
I was one of them. We've talked about this because it does a better job of interviewing me than the previous CPAs that I've had.
Patients like me had 300,000 people connect with others who share their condition. So these are communities where you have a diagnosis, you go, you find other people with that diagnosis, you learn what they're doing, what their protocols are, what drugs they're taking, the side effects, treatments, all of that. What they're saying, Ed, is, we've talked about knowledge as a non-rival asset, right? It can be more, it can be in more than one place at a time. Mm-hmm. And when I give you knowledge, it doesn't diminish, right? You have it, now I still have it. Right. Well, knowledge, can also be digitized. And that includes expertise, and even tacit knowledge to some extent can be embedded in these communities of experience, which are basically the users. That would be like patients like me. They can also be embedded in user communities. Practitioner communities. That would be like CrowdMed, right? This is where you can go post your symptoms and doctors will come in and diagnose it, including, by the way, on that particular app, laymen will diagnose it. Well, in some categories, the laymen are doing better diagnosis than the professional. And what they're saying is the grand bargain the society has made, they call it the grand bargain, society has made with professionals is they've given them a monopoly because they're the keepers of the knowledge. That is crumbling because there's other ways to access knowledge. No longer in the future, heck, I would say even now to some extent, are experts or professionals the only place where you can seek knowledge. You can get it in a lot of other places, including AI systems, including outfits like Watson, right? And decision tree software and things like that. So as that happens, then the influence in the sphere of the professions will shrink. And they say this will take place in about 2 decades.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. And I'm not completed reading the book. I'm about halfway through, but they do say this is not going to happen and crumble overnight. But one of the things they do talk about with regard to this grand bargain, as they call it, is the challenge is what we would call as economists rent seeking.
Absolutely.
Right? The fact that the professionals, especially those that are already state sanctioned, are going to do their darndest to make sure that these things cannot get or are going to struggle getting in. But like taxis and Uber, it's ultimately going to fail. I was just going to say, if you thought the taxis created a storm over Uber and the hotels with Airbnb, you ain't seen nothing yet. Yeah. You ruffle the feathers of a profession, and there's going to be some hell to pay, quite literally. You're right. They are not going to go down without an enormous fight. But you know what? It kind of goes back to that line. Nobody can deny us our future. Consumers are sovereign. But just one more fascinating statistic, and it kind of ties in with your book. Humans are underrated, and just how perilous it is to try and predict what computers are going to do, and how much better they are at some things than humans. There, at the University of California, San Francisco, there's a robot staff pharmacy that completed over 2 million prescriptions in a year without any errors whatsoever. The average error in filling prescriptions, Ed, is 1%. That's 37 million prescriptions in the United States of America get filled in error by a live pharmacist. I always check it. I always check mine.
You have to.
You got to.
But even if you do, how do you know it's the right dosage but these computers do a much better job. The robots do a much better job. So these guys, I think, have put together a really good, I think they make their case really, really well. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they ask some profound questions too in the book, and and again, their focus is the professions. But one of the points they make is not only are the professions themselves a human construct, right? I mean, we put this together, but so is the system that might someday replace them. That will be constructed by humans as well. So, the bottom line is professions are a means to an end. They are not an end in and of themselves. And I think that's another key point. And that's probably what I really liked about the book, because it took on what it means to be a profession. And I've been thinking for a long time that the distinction or the labeling of a group of people a profession is less meaningful. I mean, I'm not about to say that my airline or yours is unprofessional. And here they are with our lives in their hands. Mm-hmm. Now, say what you want, but I put more trust in my airline than I do a doctor. Yep. Because I'm on an airline more frequently. So what does that mean to be a profession? Yeah. I just think it's slipping, and this book, I think, is really, really profound. Now, they, like Jeff Coben, they bring up the same point, that what they're looking at, okay, what will we insist that humans do even after all this great technology? And they give some concrete examples, like switch off life support, right, for a relative. You wouldn't want Watson making that decision, putting down a household pet, custody, Ed, in a divorce action. We wouldn't want a computer to do military drones and warfare. In other words, we want humans to agonize over these types of decisions and take responsibility for them. So it's kind of a morals and ethical way of looking at, what do we want humans to continue to do?
Yeah, and it is amazing, Ron, how the two books that we picked really come to the same confluence of ideas on this. And it's, yes, we have are a little bit ahead, and this is not to say that this stuff is going to fall apart tomorrow, and that accountants, lawyers are going to be out of work and marching in the streets in 2016, right? That's not not what we're saying at all. But not at all. What I do think is I think that most people in those professions don't realize how close it is. Right?
I agree.
The example that I'll give, and I know I've shared this with you, and maybe we should post this as part of our show notes, just as an example, is one that from journalism. Right, I told you about the app that we use to track the scoring at my son's baseball game. He's 10.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Right? And in addition to keeping all of the stats, the batting average and all that stuff, it does the spray charts and that you'd see on like ESPN. Now this is for 10-year-olds, right? But wait, it gets better. But wait, there's more. It also, at the end of once you submit the statistics, writes a story about the game.
About the game. Yeah. Yeah. And computers
and it's
are
not bad. I mean, it ain't
and
Lardner or Studs Terkel, but it's pretty good.
One more thing, Ed, before we take a break, I just want to slide this in here, because back to your comment about, empathy or compassion. What these guys say, because they really do answer every single objection that they've heard about their thesis in the book. That's another thing I really appreciate. It. They attack their own thesis and then try and answer it. And people say, well, you'd never want Watson to deliver your fatal diagnosis. And they say, well, let's not give the professionals that much credit. They're not a very compassionate folk, some of them. Maybe I would rather have a robot deliver because they say a lot of professionals are SOBs, and you know what? They're right. Because if you look at why firms lose customers, it's because customers don't believe they care about them, and they make a really strong argument that compassion in the professions is completely overrated.
Yep. No, I agree. Well, Ron, thanks for sharing that book with us. It's another fascinating book, and we look forward to having. Should we release here that we're going to have them on?
We're going to have the son on, Daniel.
Okay, Daniel's going to be on the show in January, so we're really looking forward to that. But coming up next, we have an interview with the sage Small Business Person of the Year for Canada. And his name is David Cohen, and he is with a company called the Boomer Business Coach. So we'll be interviewing him in our next segment. So looking forward to that. But in the meantime, please go out and visit us at thesoulofenterprise.com. We certainly want you to keep those reviews coming on iTunes. As we've discussed, those are like the currency for us. So the more reviews that you can write on iTunes, the better. Of course, we want you to buy our book and write the review of that as well on Amazon. So we really appreciate that. But right now, we're going to hear from our sponsor and Sage partner, Azamba.
We're making it easier to listen to the Voice America Talk Radio Network live wherever you go on iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android. Download it from the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
We believe great companies can become even greater by challenging the status quo within their companies. The latest challenge to your status quo? The way people buy has changed. Buyers now control the majority of the front end of the sales process. Sellers must learn to facilitate a buying process, not conduct a sales process. Social buying signals are an opportunity for sales. Learn more. Go to quantacrm.com/ABC to request a copy of the white paper, Always Be Closing, a guide to the new art of social selling.
Have you ever read a book that changed your life? I sure have. But have you ever read a book where the foreword changed your life? Me neither. Hello, I'm Greg Kite. I wrote the foreword to Ron Baker and Ed Kless's new ebook, The Soul of Enterprise, Dialogues on Business and the Knowledge Economy. The value of this book is found entirely in its foreword. So when you buy it, think of it as buying the foreword and getting the rest of the book for free. Available now for download exclusively on Amazon.com.
We're always talking business. Talk to an expert. Call now, toll free, 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Voice America Business Network.
More from Mannheim Steamroller. Love those guys, Ron. Well, now we have with us the Boomer Business Coach, David Cohen. David, you are the winner of the Canadian Sage Small Business of the Year. Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise.
Thank you very much, Ed. I guess because I am the Canadian winner, I have to say thank you very much, eh?
Yes, that's a requirement.
Yeah, and I should be sipping a Tim Hortons coffee while I'm at it.
We're more LeBlat's Blue kind of guys, so we'll.
All right, good move. It is
but
Friday
again,
afternoon after all.
Yes, exactly. And you're East Coast, so it's even closer to 5 o'clock for you. So
yeah, it's almost 5 o'clock somewhere here. Yeah.
Well, again, welcome to the show. And first, tell us a little bit about your organization.
Well, it's called the Boomer Business Coach, and the Coles Note story is that it was born out of sort of my own life journey, where about 4 years ago I lost a job, or was cut it was a government contract that I had, and the contract got cut. A few weeks later, unfortunately, my mom, at 86, passed away, not unexpectedly, and then a few days after that, my brother-in-law had a heart attack and survived, thank God. But it was just like that whole month kind of just rocked my world. And I'm thinking, man, if this is going on for me as an early boomer, I wonder if it's going on for other people. If we're going through these big huge shifts and changes, not only in our work life but just in our lives in general. And my research sort of pointed to the fact that, yes, that was, in fact, happening, and boomers were the fastest growing segment going into business for themselves. And then I just sort of did more research, and I am a business coach and facilitator and trainer. that was my business before, and I just I just shifted my name and shifted the positioning strategy to the Boomer Business Coach, working with other boomers who are going through this sort of work-life balance, career transition thing.
And you have a pretty interesting coaching philosophy. I was reading on your website, and Ron and I were talking before the show that you use many of the words that resonate a lot with us. You may have heard we're word guys. So your first one, which is have a strong sense of the 10 attributes. 10 attributes of a successful coach is first, have a strong sense of self, value themselves intrinsically, and are confident and show up authentically. Authentically is a big word for both Ron and I, and would be curious to think how do you view authenticity? When you hear the word authentic, what does that mean to you?
To me, it's just be yourself. Don't be anything else or try to be anything else. I mean, just be real with people about where you're at, who you are, what you're up to. And, we all come with, our fears and our worries, and maybe we're are not good enough, and those stories that, that play in our minds. And it's just it's okay, just be real, and we're all okay. We're all in this together trying to make the best of it, and just be who you are. Don't be anything more or don't be anything less.
Right, and of course, honesty comes into play there as well. But what I really like about the word authentic is I believe it even goes beyond honesty, right? Because there are plenty of consultants that I've encountered who are honest but not authentic. Mm-hmm. And in that, and here's an example: is they will not say what they actually see because they're concerned in some way about, well, if I say this, will the customer not appreciate what I bring to the table? And they're concerned, well, would I lose the engagement or something like that? So that in other words, it's more not a lack of truthfulness, but a lack of volunteering information that they are really feeling and seeing that they're not willing to say.
Yeah, but my view is you're not doing anybody a service, especially your clients. And I think it's okay to, agree to disagree. If we're not serving our clients at the end of the day, then we're not doing our jobs as coaches or as, radio show hosts or as vendors, retailers. I think we have to, be real and just call it the way we see it, and be open to the fact that there might not be agreement all the time, and that's okay, right?
David, this is Ron, and I was also looking at your website, and I noticed that you have the Business Plan Boot Camp. And what intrigued me is you have a section called Great Service, and it's probably one of the reasons Ed and I are doing this radio show or even got together is I started back in the mid-'80s studying great service companies. Back then, it was Disney and Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom and all of that. And I just found it interesting. You mentioned Dr. Patty Lund. Yeah. And I wrote a book called The Firm of the Future with a colleague, Paul Dunn, who was from Australia, and he knew Patty. Yeah. And I was just wondering, did you ever get a chance to meet Patty?
I haven't, and I think the distance kind of keeps us apart. But I've read several articles about him, and just an incredible journey. And for your listeners, I don't know if they know, but he was on the brink of suicide, and he asked that question. If my business can be make me money, why can't it make me happy instead? And so he chose a very different path and chose to create a business that was about happiness and joy, not only for himself, but, it was also for his customers. And I think if we're vibing at that level, if we're having fun, we're enjoying what we're doing, then that's going to rub off on our customers. They're going to want a part of that. We don't have to market and sell so hard. People are just going to want to, have a part of that and get to work with us if we're in that sort of place. And I think it's really important for business owners, especially the boomers who are going through, say, change and transition, to kind of embrace life as it is. It's sometimes really hard if you're losing your job or if you're kind of wondering, well, what's next for me? Lead with from a place of passion and joy in what you do, and I think you'll start to attract your ideal customer.
I think that's so true. And of course, that's what Patty did, didn't he? He got rid of a lot of customers that weren't taking his advice, and he was frustrated with, and he set up this, didn't he have like a green apple on his door, and you had to have a green apple card to be able to be a patient because you had to be referred from another patient.
Yeah. And you know,
story.
change the decor and the vibe, you know, inside the office, and he pulled out every stop.
Yeah, it's really good.
And there's others too, like Mitchell Richards Clothing Store. I'm not sure if you know about them, but their philosophy is hug your customer, and I just love that, you know, and that's what they attempt to do.
You mentioned Zappos and Pike's Fish Market and all of that, and I just, I think good customer service is so important, and yet I just think it's so rare.
Yeah.
That's why these examples stand out so much, because when we experience great customer service, we want more of it. So I was just thrilled to see that that's a integral part of your teachings, because I think that's such an important and overlooked aspect of being in business, is providing great customer service.
Yeah, if you're a beacon for others, they're gonna want to come to you. You don't have to sell so hard or market so hard. They're just gonna want to gravitate and be around you.
Right.
The Container Store does a good job too, by the way. I should add that in there.
Yes, they do, and we've talked about them before, because one of the things the CEO, he gives each person like 265 hours a year of education, and I just find that amazing.
For the average company, lucky if you get 8 hours, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, Kip Kendall, not the most like wildly, crazy off the wall guy, but very, very astute businessman and doing a great job on the customer service and management aspect of running a business.
Right. And I also just wanted to ask you really quick about, you've got your entrepreneurial circles and, kind of a mastermind group, you call it. And I just, it made me think of Napoleon Hill, right? Think and Grow Rich. He talked about forming a mastermind. Is that kind of the idea behind your e-circles?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
awesome.
It's based on that concept. Jack Canfield talks about it a lot in his books and his work. And yeah, I think it's just good it's a good way to fast track your success if you're working with your peers and you're kind of facing the challenges that you face each month and moving through them faster. And your mastermind team can help you do that. So you're not, the velocity in which you face a challenge and overcome it and move forward and get traction picks up a lot when you're working in a sort of a guided e-circle or mastermind team.
David, this is Ed again. I do a podcast for Sage, and we call it the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, short form podcast. And I have an exit question that I ask on that podcast, and I'm going to ask it here of you. And this is it.
Get ready, David.
Yeah, this is my all-time favorite questions. By the way, where we've talked about this before, where Ron and I talk about interviewing people. If I could only ask one question on an interview, like if I'm interviewing someone for a job, this would be the question. So here it is: who is a hero of yours, and why are they a hero?
I'm going to say my brother-in-law, the one I spoke about. And the reason he's a hero is he's just been so consistent. He's a doctor, a general practitioner, works hard every day, gives his all to his patients, and he's just a great family guy, and well-loved by his friends, his peers, his colleagues, and his family. And I think when you have those kind of relationships, and you go to work every day and just kind of keep at it, and be steady in what you do. I think there's a real magic in that and a beauty in that, and he would be my hero.
Great. Thanks for that. And once again, David Cohen from the Boomer Business Coach and the Sage Small Business Person of the Year for Canada. Congratulations and thanks for being on the Soul of Enterprise. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Ron and Ed, and continued success and a very beautiful holiday season to both of you and your listeners.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much, David.
All right, guys. Be well.
All right. Well, we're up against our final break, and we want you to remind you, though, that you can visit our show notes and at thesoulofenterprise.com. You can use hashtag AskTSOE or at TSOE on Twitter to get a hold of us. But right now, we do want you to hear from my employer, Sage.
Follow us on Twitter at VoiceAmericaTRN. Get the lowdown on guests, new shows, and your favorites. That's VoiceAmericaTRN.
4 new employees, a 20% increase in revenue.
Being one of the 9 million women business owners in the U.S.
These are your proudest numbers, your landmarks of growth and success. Sage helps you achieve business milestones with cloud and software solutions that lead to deeper financial insights. Believe in your numbers. See what Sage can do for your business. Visit BelieveInYourNumbers.com today.
Have you ever read a book that changed your life? I sure have. But have you ever read a book where the foreword changed your life? Me neither. Hello, I'm Greg Kite. I wrote the foreword to Ron Baker and Ed Kless's new ebook, The Soul of Enterprise, Dialogues on Business and the Knowledge Economy. The value of this book is found entirely in its foreword. So when you buy it, think of it as buying the foreword and getting the rest of the book for free. Available now for download exclusively on Amazon.com.
The business community's first choice in Internet Talk Radio. Voice America Business Network.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. I could listen to that whole song, Ed. That's just awesome. Folks, we'd like to remind you, you can follow the show live at hashtag AskTSOE, and you can also email Ed or myself at asktsoe@verasage.com. We do receive your emails and reply to all of them, so really appreciate the folks that have taken the time to contact us. So, Ed, give me an honorable mention, since we decided to do our all-time favorite book of the year. So what were some that also made like your top 5 list or so?
Well, and curiously, because we were just talking about this with David Cohen, and I read this in January of this year, although I think it has been out for a little bit longer than that, is Kip Tindell's book, who's the CEO of the Container Store, called Uncontainable.
Oh, right. Okay. Yep.
Really good book. And I just love some of his philosophies. David was alluding to it earlier, but yes, they spend, I think it's about 20% of an associate's time is spent in what they call education mode, and that's for a part-time employee, or a team member, as they would call them. And when asked why during an interview. And I love this. He said, because, ready, Ron? We sell a highly customizable, complex product that solves people's problems. Okay, yeah. The Container Store sells the inside of closets.
Yeah. Closet organizers.
But to Kip Tindell, it is a highly complex product that solves people's problems.
Sure.
And I just love that, right? The idea that what they sell goes beyond just the name on the door, the Container Store. And if you've ever shopped at a Container Store, and I kid you not, Ron, I've got to have $25,000 worth of Container Store stuff in my house. I mean, I'm not kidding. We don't have a basement. We don't have a basement here in Texas, so my entire garage is lined with their shelving units, and we have closets that are lined with it. And I mean, it's really ridiculous. It's kind of like a sickness, I have to tell you. But when you go in there, like their people know not only the inventory of what's in the store. But if you're over in the shelving unit and you're like, well, what are you going to put on these shelves? They're like, okay, well, what is it that you're trying to find here? And they'll walk you across the completely other side of the store and say, well, these really go well together. Like the shelves over there and then these boxes and this is how you can fit them in and all this stuff. And you're just like, are you kidding me? I mean, they must have, I don't know, 7,000 or 8,000 SKUs in a store at any time.
Sure.
And yet almost all of the associates seem to have instantaneous recall on what's in there, and that's because they spend 20% of their time in learning mode.
I love it. Oh, that's great. Great book. What was the name of the book again?
Uncontainable. Yep.
Okay, well, I've got one I've got to mention because I tell this story all the time as a way to illustrate how slow professions are to change, but it's the Great Ulcer War. And written by William S. Hughes, who's a doctor, and he's basically profiling or telling the story of the two Australian doctors. They're from Perth, Australia, Dr. Barry Marshall, Dr. Reuben Warren, who basically had a theory back in the early 90s that ulcers were caused not by stress, but by bacteria. And the entire medical community shunned these guys. They wouldn't let them speak at conferences. They wouldn't let their articles go into peer review. They said their sample sizes were too small because they were in a outback hospital and all that. I mean, it was really kind of rude what they did to these guys. And these guys stuck with it. And they were persistent, and they just kept, curing people's ulcers with their antibiotic regimen. And the only company that paid attention to them, Ed, which I thought was really interesting, was Procter & Gamble. But anyway, long story short, it took these guys from 1982, which is when they came up with the theory, to 1996 to get the medical community to buy the fact that ulcers were not caused by stress. They were caused by bacteria. And, of course, they went on to win the 2005 Nobel Prize in Medicine for their discovery. But here's my point. It's 14 years they fought the so-called quote-unquote acid mafia wars. It took them 14 years in a scientific, empirically based profession to change minds. How long is it going to take us to change minds in the accounting, legal profession and all of that? This stuff is measured in decades, literally.
Yeah, and that is going to be a challenge. I mean, because let's face it, the CPAs and lawyers are not scientifically based, although they love to think they are. And even most businesses, this goes to our theory that of what logical positivism in business is just because we have data, we think we're scientific.
Right. And boy, do we run from facts and evidence.
Right. So that's going to be interesting. All right. Well, let me give you one more.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to give you. I just want to, because the one more I really want to give is a book we've already dealt with. I can't not mention a more beautiful question.
It's a great book.
I can't not mention it because I almost had to put it first, but we already talked about it on another show, so I was like, all right, I'll do Humans Are Underrated. But I just absolutely loved A More Beautiful Question as a book because it just resonated with me because this is what I do is think about asking questions, and the fact that this book has an index of questions in the back. It was that profound, and I really resonated with it, and I think they did a fantastic job on a very difficult topic of presenting it. So I just want to mention A More Beautiful Question again.
And that I gotta believe too,
Warren Berger.
I gotta believe Uncommon Sense and Common Nonsense would be high on your list too, since you read that this year, and we did interview Jules Goddard.
It was. That would have been next.
Yep. So, okay, I'll give you a couple. Well, you said two, so go ahead and take another one.
Well, no, I was going to give Uncommon Sense, Common Nonsense. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder. Another book I really liked was 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. And I usually just, shy away from listicle books, right? But I like this one just because the 13 things is just a great reminder of things that you shouldn't be doing, and things like don't expect immediate results, and don't afraid to go against the common opinion and all that. And another book that I have to give honorable mention to is Leadership BS by Jeffrey Pfeiffer.
Yeah,
and he just calls out the whole leadership industry and takes them to task. And you and I have talked about. There's no Hebrew word for leader, so Rabbi Daniel Lapin doesn't think it's needed, and it's, leadership is a verb, it's not a noun, and all of our issues with leadership, oh boy, does Pfeiffer take it to task. And I just thought he did a really, really good job with talking about how the leadership industry is full of great stories and inspiring anecdotes, but when it comes to reality, they're awful. And,
go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, so I found it a very, very compelling argument, even though I'll admit I was drawn to that argument anyway, but he really solidified it for me.
It was beyond that for me when I read, honestly, I don't know if I finished that because I think that was one that I was like 3/4 of the way through and you said, you got to read this. And I put it aside. So that happens to me a lot. But the thing that was so good about that book is that it made me go, you know what? I probably do some of this stuff and I got to be careful.
Yeah, we all do, for sure. Absolutely. Using anecdotes or feel-good stories or whatever. And just one more, Ed, because of the economic times, and we've talked about, the Great Recession and the housing bust and all that. And we've talked about this book, at least off air, The Forgotten Depression, 1921, by James Grant. Folks, it's a fantastic book because the government here did nothing in response to a very, very deep recession. In fact, in some ways, it was worse than the early part of the Great Depression. And the government's response was nothing. And we came out of it relatively rapidly, and then it led to the booming 20s. So just a fantastic historical look, which I found really interesting.
All right. Well, we're up against the end of the show, Ron. So what do we got going on next week?
Next week, because of the truncated holiday schedule, we're going to do Free Writer Friday.
Awesome.
So I'm really looking forward to that. So I'll see you in 167 hours, Ed. This has been The Soul of Enterprise, Business and the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by Sage, supporting small and medium-sized businesses by creating greater freedom for them to succeed. Join us next week, folks, on Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be doing Free Writer Friday. In the meantime, visit us at thesoulofenterprise.com. We'll have full show notes posted and the books we mentioned and other resources. And also remember, you can contact Ed or myself at TSOE or asktsoe@verasage.com. Thanks for listening, folks. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you here next week.